Hey everyone, Coach Patrick here from Endurance Nation, back with another weekly broadcast. Today's topic, managing early season adjustments. And there's nothing worse than having high ambitions for a year and a hot start. You're ready to go. The numbers are ticking in the right direction, power numbers going up, pace numbers dropping, body composition numbers dropping, crushing those workouts. Everything seems aligned. And then reality sets in, right? Which is that we can only control the local effects of our training and success for so long before other stressors are induced into the system. There's a variety of things that can get in the way. Work, something can come up at work, something with family, right? A challenge there, something outside of those two elements, maybe a job change or something, or an additional stressor you hadn't thought of, right? It could be illness, right? You could be sick or just not sure, playing it safe. There could be a travel requirement or reduction, some version of that. The point being that there's lots of different levers that life can pull to make your tiny ship pointed in the right direction to that wonderful destination that's making great progress early on, really not look so great. So I want to talk a little bit today about handling those changes. What are some positive steps you can take? And I'm going to start off with a bigger picture look at things. And first, we just really need to step back and take a deep breath. If you've already know where you're going, you're already ahead of the majority of people out there. If you have a plan, you're like in the top 10% now. And if you've been executing that plan, put yourself in like the top 2% of everybody, because you've got those three elements dialed in, which is fantastic. So when things do go wrong, you have a lot of things going in your favor, right? You already know where you want to go, so we just got to get you pointed back in that direction. You already know how you're going to get there because you've already set out a plan, so we just got to adjust that plan. And you already are taking steps to get there, so it's about changing some of those steps. So all of these pieces involve small changes, right? Little tweaks and so on. It's physically hard to do that because in a way, it was just so good. Why isn't it working now? And can it just work again? We're like reluctant to get in there and toggle things. Like this thing was so perfect. So it's like your laptop. You're like, maybe I'll just turn it off and turn it back on again and it'll work. Or maybe I'll just shake it and things will be better. And the reality is, no, you have to get comfortable lifting up the hood, rolling up those sleeves, get your hands a little dirty, get in there and turn the dials, etc. That, ironically, is where a lot of the magic happens. I'm going to come back to that later for you as a self-coached athlete. On the flip side, it's a lot easier to just say, I'm just going to dynamite this thing and reboot. Like, it's not working. I was going to go to this destination. I was going to take this plan to this destination. I'm going to dynamite it. I'm going to get rid of the destination. I'm going to get rid of this plan. Or I'm just going to totally change my entire daily schedule. No more working out at night. Forget all that. I'm just going to become a morning person. Those types of changes, super sexy, super appealing. And when you tell people about them or think about them, inside your body, there's like a reward mechanism that says, yeah, let's totally do it. That reward mechanism that's saying, let's totally dynamite everything, usually is because a lot of you doesn't want to deal with the buttons and the switches and changing all the little dials. And it's really appealing to say, just dynamite it and start over again. But again, like anything worthwhile, actually wrestling with a problem is where the magic happens. Think about your relationship. My wonderful, amazing wife will tell you that the only reason our relationship is successful, oh dear God, I hope she says the relationship is successful, is because we work on it on a regular basis. You can't just say, it's been a tough week. We're just going to dynamite this thing and just go on to the next one. And so when we think about it for our training as well, it's important to understand that this is that relationship mechanism. And actually, pulling my pen back in right now, this is where the magic happens. Actually understanding the challenges that you're facing right now early in the season, what the friction is. Is it physical? Is it recovery? Is it nutritional? Is it scheduling? Is it family? Is it life? Is it work? All those different elements, understanding what that friction is, we can start creating and trying small steps, small solutions, make a hypothesis, we'll actually test against it, and see what actually works. We make these changes and small tweaks now. The runway they have to have a net positive improvement across the rest of the year is immense. If we get it right in February, you've got February to October. That's fantastic. Think of all the compounding benefits from having solved that, right? Just dynamiting your plan and getting rid of it doesn't actually address the root cause of where the friction is. You're assuming that you can just make something brand new that will fit with all the challenges you have, when in reality, getting the thing that you have to fit into the things that are around you is actually part of the process. Cutting a little bit off, sanding some down, adding a little bit of glue, changing the perspective, all of that stuff as you're making the diorama, if you will, of your season is all about the changes. And those changes is what is going to help you set you free. Okay, so here we go. And so just understand frustration is normal, but you're in a great place. All right, here we go. So the first place to start when we're managing our season is to dive into your training log. You do have a training log, right? We use Final Search here inside Endurance Nation for our teammates. Other people will use Trainer Day. Other people will use Training Peaks. Some people use intervals.icu. Whatever you record your workouts, please tell me they don't just live in Garmin, which is not built to monitor or use workouts. It just collects data. And you can see it from their interface. God love Garmin, but not the place where I want to be manipulating stuff or understanding my work. We want a place where you can actually see your data. We want to see strengths and weaknesses. Strava is a great way to look at this as well. The Strava Premium subscription, if you can afford it, lets you see your training log, and you filter by modality. And it really starts to help show you the flow of your season. And this is important because your data itself tells a story. If you talk to someone who's training for the Boston Marathon, say, how's the training list? Training's going great. It's awesome. Long runs, the long runs are getting up there. Things are really good. And you walk away from that being like, wow, this person's really got it all together. Then you go look at the data and you're like, ooh, no, you missed 2 weeks here. And they're like, oh, I was sick. And then this run looked good, but then it stopped. And then like later on, like he walked the last 3 miles. Like, oh yeah, I had this new shoes, terrible blister, haven't solved that problem yet. The data actually brings out more stories. And we need to turn that lens inward first to say, let me take a look at my data. What is my data telling me? You have friction, you've got a problem. Before you just start responding to solve that problem like a ridiculous jerk of a guy in a relationship, yeah, tried that before, not so good, is to go back and say, what's happening here? Let me just do a baseline check. Let's just look at the system, look at all the sensors we have out there, what's happening. So start there and start to see if you can identify any patterns related to that issue. So if your weekends are tough or if your Mondays are tough, take a look at your weekend data or take a look at your weekday data, see the trends that are there, see what's happening. What is the expression of the friction that you finally identified? What expression does it show across the last 3 months of your year, of your training? Start to understand what those trends are. This is important because it's going to show you not only where the friction is because you know it's there, but it also shows you the opportunities and some of the solutions or steps you probably have already taken. And you'll be reminded of that by going back to the training log and seeing a visual representation of what your training looks like. So always start with your data, right? If you're looking for a solution, start with your data, okay? Number 2, let's look for some points of failure inside that data. So where are the days that you missed? Right? Where's the notes around illness? If you've got like your body battery thing that we have inside Final Surge, where is that low? HRV, if you're tracking that, when did that go south? What are some of the things that we see? Not just from the acute level of where you are now. I don't feel good. Numbers are bad. I get it. You're looking for bad numbers. You don't feel good. But what about systemically? Let's look over the course of a week. How do things float over the course of the week? When are things good? When are things not good? When are you in the zone? When are you out of the zone? I use HRV on a daily basis, not to guide my training, but as an additional overlaying metric to help me understand where do I typically encounter stress in a week and how do I go through the process of making myself a better athlete. We want to make sure that we're always trying to iterate better. So for me, when I do my longer rides on Fridays and bigger work on Saturdays, I know that my poor sleep on Thursday night is a liability. I need extra sleep on Friday night. Sometimes I'll have to skip a Saturday early morning session to recover. And you'll notice that from some of these data trends that exist out there. So identify those areas that do compromise you on a regular basis. And then we can start reverse engineering backwards, which takes me to step 3. Step 3, we start with our top 3 things. So when you look at your data, you have your problem. Okay, I'm missing like my Saturday, Sunday workouts are bad. Let's just pick that as our hypothesis right now. There's a bunch of different reasons why Saturday and Sunday workouts could be bad for you. Just not hitting the numbers, hard to be motivated, etc. It's natural to look for the general solution. We'll go back to our data and we'll take a look at what's happening. It looks like from the data, you're right. You're not hitting the workouts the way that we want to be hitting them. You're getting sometimes you get the time done, but sometimes you miss a session. There's just a lot of friction on the weekends for you. Monday through Fridays look good, but there's just some friction here on the weekends for you. What are we going to do? And we'll see what things look like across here. And we can see that you're missing these longer weekend workouts, which because you're hitting the weeks isn't so bad now, but over time could be eventually be a problem because you're not getting those weekends done. So what are we going to do? We need to figure out some steps we can take here. So we want to identify in this part here, we want to identify the top 3 things we can do, right? So top 3 things we can do. Let's take a look at those weekend workouts and figure out, are we doing them at the right time? What's happening here? Can we do them maybe a little bit earlier, go to bed earlier, a little bit earlier? Or are you a party animal and you're staying up too late and as a result, you're compromising the next day? Maybe we'll push those workouts a little later. Maybe we'll have a party animal, post-party animal, party decompression piece where we'll have you do a banana and some Propel and really get hydrated again before you go to bed so you wake up a slightly better human being. Whatever that element is, we need to dive into that process. So pick the top 3 things that you want to address, put those down on a piece of paper, and let's start going through and figuring out some solution steps that we can take to address this issue. So there's a couple different things with each example. I'm going to go, the weekend's kind of a little big, so let's go specifically by sport here. So I'm going to do a run example, a cycling example, and then a body composition example for challenge. So on the run side, if you're just not getting those longer runs in at the way that you want on the weekends, like what's happening, one of the challenges we have on the run side is that there's a great deal of fatigue that goes into your system at any given time of year. By the time we get to the weekend, we think about that 7-day acute training load cycle. You start on Monday with your training, let's say, and you go to Sunday. It's the way people typically think about a week. Although I understand in some parts of the world, they think Sunday to Saturday, which doesn't make sense to me, but Monday to Sunday. By the time you get to your long run on the weekend, you've had consecutive 5-6 days of good work. It puts a lot of training load on you to be actually able to run well. Now that's an adaptation process. We get better, but when people have higher expectations for that run or specific time goals for that run, etc., and you're running into the part where you're carrying all the fatigue from the week, that can be challenging, right? How do we address that? Step 1 is maybe we take some of the run off the schedule before you get to that, say, Sunday long run. So if you're going to brick on Saturday or do a short skill run on Friday, maybe get rid of those 2 runs and we just run on Saturday. Even though it means a reduction in total running, we are getting that long run in on Saturday. So priority number 1. Priority number 2, maybe we swap Saturday and Sunday, right? We say, I'm going to take that long run from Sunday. We're going to move it to Saturday and have that long bike be on Sunday, for example, or a long aerobic session, whatever it is, complementary. But we're going to prioritize that important run workout on Saturday, first day of the weekend, as opposed to later. See if we can elicit some of those elements that make sense. And last but not least, a little bit more technical, but something else to consider is just nutrition. By the time we get to the end of the week, we have that fatigue, our bodies run down. Weekend, typically we change up our sleeping pattern and our social patterns, and those things can all sort of add and make the run itself a tougher session. And so I've often found that changing how you fuel, accelerating the fuel process, perhaps even having a little more fuel, being intentional about your breakfast, all those things can come together to actually make that run a better run. But you can't just handle it the way you've handled it during the week. These long runs require nutrition, they require calories, they require hydration status being up there. So it's all that's really important. Okay. All right, let's switch gears. Let's talk a little bit about the bike side as well. On the bike side inside of Endurance Nation, one of the common challenges we have is that people are not able to hit their testing numbers. Right, so I tested on the threshold power. My threshold power is 200 watts, but when I do my intervals, I don't come close to 200 watts. I'm like 180. I'm like 10% down or 185. I'm just not feeling it. I can't get that number back to the 200 like I tested. What's the story? Okay, so number 1, we want to make sure the test was a good test, and the data will help us understand that. It's possible that you did a test and you took the number and you took 95% of that number, which got you your 200, but really you should have taken like 90%. So you may have just tested and given yourself a higher number than you probably should have. And so first of all, that step there is we're just making sure that you are in fact using the right True North Star metric for the cycling area and not just following a number that makes sense. There's a little flexibility in cycling and people are tempted to go harder. It's non-weight bearing. You can push yourself. You get just the right music, just the right caffeinated gel, in the good mood, and you can crush a test. That doesn't always translate out. So being in the ballpark of your threshold number is generally okay for me within that 10%, but I understand when people don't want to hit those numbers. So number 1, let's confirm the test was good and we're using the right math, okay? Number 2 here on the bike side as well is to make sure that we're actually really warmed up. People don't understand how much warming up is required to be able to hit that threshold number. We often warm up, say 20 or 30 minutes before a test, but when we get to a workout, people will generally just warm up for 10 minutes and start to do their workout. And so making sure that you are factoring in the time to warm up can be huge. And the data, again, will show us that. I can look at your test session. I can see how much you warmed up for the test and the test numbers you did. I can go back and look at your bike sessions for the last Tuesdays and Thursdays for the last 3 weeks. I get 6 workouts out of that. And I can see how much you warmed up before the work that you did. Odds are, and most of the time, it's simply you're not warming up enough to get to a place where you can do the work that's required. That's another great section to check out. And then again, the third part, I'll go back to the nutrition side. More often than not, to be able to hit a hard training session during the week when you're carrying acute training load from other systemic workouts across the block of your week, you're just not fueled enough. And so try the fuel side. It's the easiest thing to do is to just have a gel before you start the session just to see. If you can solve something with calories, you should absolutely solve it. I'm not wearing my calories equal velocity t-shirt today, but we're asking your body to do extra work. It needs fuel. And starting with that simply is just the easiest and fastest way to go about it. So those are 3 ways we could adjust that based on using your data and making sure that we're reducing that friction of not being able to hit our numbers and feeling like we've got to adjust the whole year because we're not going to hit those numbers. So get in there, start making some tweaks to that system. We're going to learn something along the way. All right. Last but not least, body composition. One of my least favorite topics to talk about is really interesting for people. So body composition actually ends up in a space where people have goals related to body composition, but it's really hard to understand which inputs are the best inputs for you to make changes inside that system. We understand collectively that if I want to be able to run 50 miles, I've got to run more miles than I'm running now. Or if I want to be able to run a 1-minute mile super fast, I've got to run faster than I'm running now. That makes sense. When we want to improve our body composition, it's a system, and there's lots of things going on there, and it's really hard to find the lever that's going to work for you. And so if you had goals for your body composition and you're not hitting those numbers over time, it's important that we do get into experimentation, but that we make note of all the changes that we're making so we can understand within the context of our training system that we're making the decisions that work well with our outstanding goals. I can't have a goal that allows me to lose weight, but also I lose all my power and strength elsewhere, because then I'm not actually training anymore. I've prioritized body composition over everything else. I can't make broad-based decisions to remove, say, all carbohydrates or all processed sugars from my diet right away until I can understand what's the effects of those parts of my system. It will be more of a gradual change and trying things differently. The nutrition side falls more into that dynamite space because it's more attractive. Like, no more cookies, and we just dynamite our pantry and get rid of all processed sugary foods and everything like that. That sounds great, but of course you have a family probably or other people who like those cookies, so check with those people first. But more importantly, nutrition is something where we just don't know what the lever is that's going to make that change. And so this is really tough. So if you're not hitting those goals with your body composition, step number 1 is just taking a look, stepping back at your data. But if you're not already, if you are concerned about body composition, you should just start tracking the food that you eat, generally on what you eat during the day and then what you eat during the workout stuff. So let's just see where that lays. So you could just say, it has to be big. Breakfast, I had this cookie. Lunch, I had this meal. Dinner, I had this meal. I had this dessert. I snacked here and there, etc. Let's just see the totality of when you are eating and what it is you're eating. Ballpark, again, doesn't have to be precise. That's really helpful. Similarly, we want to see when you're exercising, what are you drinking, what are you eating, where are the calories coming from exercise? And so just seeing those 2 elements will get a sense of how you're fueling yourself during the workouts and how you're fueling yourself during the day. And we just want to get a baseline understanding. Most people start with what my lean body mass is and what my calories should be, but I just want to start with what are you putting in your body? Like, what do you do on a regular basis? What does that average out to be? What can it tell me about who you are based on that data? And that becomes really important. Once I know those elements, then I can start making decisions around where are the spaces inside the body composition system where I can institute a change that's going to yield better positive outcomes for me. So one of the easy ones for me is making sure that I don't eat after 8 o'clock. I'm well fed, I don't have issues, but eating after 8 o'clock is just something I do because I'm usually working or doing something else. I'm getting tired. As I get tired, I make worse food choices, and it's easy for me to just snack on something or do something at the time. It doesn't improve my performance, doesn't improve my mood. It just allows me to keep going here on the work side. And that's a net negative for me. I'll put extra calories in after 8 o'clock, so I have to work on that. Number 2, I typically, when I'm not paying attention to my food, even though I have body composition goals, I make poor choices in that I don't eat a breakfast because I'm a body composition person. So it's easy to be super into body composition in the morning. And then later in the day, the need for calories ramps up at the worst time of day because I'm tired and I can't make good decisions. Instead, I need to put those calories balanced and appropriately delivered at a time of day when I'm ready to handle them. Like right now, actually, I probably should be having some kind of a recovery shake after my long run, then deferring that until later. So the timing of the calories can also manage from body composition side. And then number 3 on the body composition side for overall nutrition is changing some of the bigger pieces, which can be more challenging, which is, how do I get better at dealing with specific meals? How do I have a healthier lunch? Or how do I have a healthier dinner? Once we start looking at the food, we've eliminated the low-hanging fruit of just poor food choice timing or just poor snacks. If you have a Snickers bar every day at lunch, let's replace that with some healthy food. Let's try and do the work to get you to that place where that works. But eventually we have to get to a place you may want to start looking at some of those meals, right? How do we remove some of the excessive carbohydrates? Do we really need rice and potatoes with your chicken for dinner tonight? Can we just have one starch or a smaller serving of starch and more protein? What does that look like? That is where the rubber really meets the road, and we're having some additional help make sense. But we want to take those early investments first to see what's working for you. Okay, we want to make the small changes to see what happens. So In retrospect, just looking back at this plan, overall thinking about how do we make these early season adjustments, the key parts here are start with your data. Take a look at what the data is telling you from a story, not just from the problem and the pain point that you're experiencing. Identify those points of failure, pick 3 of them that we want to address, and then we create a plan for addressing them just like I talked about now. That's the best way forward. It gives you the focus to know that this is what I'm working on. You've got a plan. You're going to execute it for the month or for the week. We can start focusing on this and notice to see if we have positive outcomes or not positive outcomes. You'd be surprised more often than not. People will say top 3, but what about the other 7 problems I have? A lot of times these problems overlap in ways that we're not really aware. And if we can solve 1 or 2 of them, if they're the right ones that you chose, you're going to see benefits elsewhere across the system. Solving my sleeping problem has helped me improve my nutrition problem, which seems completely unrelated, but in retrospect are highly correlated in terms of the choices that I make for food. We want to make sure that we're doing these pieces intentionally, we're documenting them, and then identifying the wins across the board. You may only have to make 3 changes this season to see those gains, but we won't know until we start the process. Best of luck. If you've got questions for us, hit us up on the socials. Those of you on the team, hit us inside the community, ask a question section. Happy to help you wrestle with this. Otherwise, remember, don't get frustrated with these early season changes. It's totally normal. We'll get you back on track soon enough and get you ready to crush your race. Take care, everyone. I'll see you later.